All right. So, who's ready to look at animals? Now, we got the animal characteristics in general. We talked about basic body plans. Now, let's talk about the first animals. So, the first animals had these choanocytes, these flagellated cells that basically captured water. The first animals were sponges. Okay. Now, sponges are incredibly simple. They're just a group of cells that work collectively in are embedded in this sort of matrix of extracellular material. So they don't even have true tissues. But these simple animals will move water through their bodies and then filter detritus or dead plant and animal material as water moves through them. So again, first animals, sort of pretty inconspicuous beginning. Let's see. Their skeletons are made of two structures: spicules, which can be sort of glassy or stony, and then spongin, which is the spongy material in plants. The next group we'll look at are the cnidarians. Now, cnidocytes are stinging cells, so easy to spot a cnidarian because, well, they'll sting organisms typically. Let's see. Now, main characteristics include, excuse me. Well, who's winning this here? All right. Cnidarians include jellyfish, the sea anemones, and corals. Now, their body does have true tissue, so they have a primitive gut. So we see the creation of a primitive stomach, if you will. They also have nervous tissue. So nerves, simple muscles, simple gut started with cnidarians. Now these are, the brainless predators. So you see these organisms move around through the oceans, and they have little cells these will have little tentacles that will actually go and capture food or detritus floating in the water. Jellyfish will ensnare prey within their tentacles and then pull the prey into their primitive guts. Polyps or hydras are like a jellyfish, but they are attached to some sort of substrate or surface. So the stinging celled animals, the big step up for these individuals is that they have true tissues. They have primitive tissue. They have a primitive gut, and they have a sort of primitive nerve nets. Okay. Let's see. Oh, big step up here. Cephalization. Now, cephalized organisms, they have a head. That's the whole idea here. Now, with the head, the sense organs have been concentrated with one part of the body. So you can imagine your different senses, structures associated with each of those senses are found on your head. Now, why would this happen? Well, organisms that have undergone cephalization typically possess bilateral symmetry, which means they have right and left sides of their body. Now, a right side and a left side, that's conducive to movement. Cephalized organisms are on the move, and they're predators. Okay, these organisms will go out and actively find food. So it makes sense that if you're on the move with your right and left halves, that you concentrate your nerve endings or concentrate your senses in one part of the body oriented in the direction of movement. So big step up. Here you see bilateral symmetry, like a crustacean here has right and left halves. Everything's concentrated in the head, moves in one direction. Now, organisms that are sessile or attached to a substrate can have radial symmetry. They have no front or back, but that makes sense for them. So it allows them to interact with all portions of their environment equally well, rather than concentrating sense organs in the direction of movement. Okay. All right, now, while we have primitive heads, our next step up are the worms. Okay, so basic idea: worms, they have bilateral symmetry. There you go. Now, not a whole lot you need to know. Just realize they're flatworms. Flatworms include tapeworms. They don't have any real body cavity, but they do have a gut. So they have an exterior and an interior where the food's processed, but it's just basically packing material, packing tissue in between. There you see the mouth, takes everything into the primitive gut. They have nerves concentrated in the eye spots so they can sense light and dark. Okay, lovely. Many flatworms have a life cycle that includes intermediate hosts and hosts used for sexual reproduction. Nematodes, the roundworms, again, these are pseudocoelomates. So they have a gut, they have an exterior lining, but this is not packed with specific mesodermal tissue, so they don't have the same kind of internal organ development that we associate with more complex animals. So roundworms, trichinoworms is what you get in undercooked pork. These little roundworms that act as parasites. Again, roundworms, many of them will be parasites, free-living parasites. Now, the annelids are the segmented worms. These are like the earthworms that you're thinking of, or you may think of. Now, these organisms are true coelomates. They have a true body cavity lined with mesodermal tissue, and this allows for increased complexity. Okay, life's going to get more interesting here shortly. So basic idea, just recognize there are different types of worms. The biggest thing with worms is recognizing that their body cavities show a progression to a stage that provides greater complexity. Now, everything else after this point is a coelomate. It has a true body cavity. The first group that we'll look at here are the mollusks. Now, mollusks basically oftentimes will have a shell and a soft body. Okay. Now, all sorts of mollusks here. It's a pretty wide-ranging group. The first group that we'll look at are the gastropods. Gastro means stomach, pod means foot. So that means they have a stomach foot, or snails. They walk along on their bellies. Okay, so the gastropods, again, they have a shell and a soft body. Ooh, a mollusk. Bivalves, easiest thing to think of, they've got the shells. Again, soft little body here. I'm sure that looks like a delicious meal to someone, but they have these soft bodies, little filter feeders. They have little valves, well, 2 of them, hence the name, that they can extend out and they can filter water. Chitons, their shells become these little plates that act like armor. The nautilus, okay, well, it belongs to the group of cephalopods. Cephal is head, pod is foot. So they're basically a head with feet. That includes octopi and squid. Now, their shells are either internal or completely lacking. These organisms, though, are very bright predators. They can solve simple problems and are quite adept at hiding from and attacking prey, which makes sense that they need to be intelligent because they lack much of the protection of the other mollusks that have shells. So they need to be quick and smart to evade predators and capture prey. Mollusks, okay, well, people like them. It used to be that buttons were made of pearl from the inside of mollusk shells. So even plastic buttons that you see today have been pearlized. If you take a look at a button-down or button-up shirt, the buttons likely are sort of shiny plastic to sort of be a throwback to the good old days of having to kill bivalves to make clothes. Arthropods. Arthro means joint, pod is foot. So these are organisms that have some pretty spectacular adaptations. Now, their body is broken into 3 main compartments: head, thorax, abdomen. Fine. Now, what's interesting about them is they have this exoskeleton, okay? So they have a chitinous exoskeleton. Remember, chitin is related to fungi and their cell walls. But in this case, they make it a skeleton to which muscles can attach. Now, arthropods include some of the most successful groups of animals in the history of the Earth. Now, they have sort of humble beginnings in the trilobites, but then we see these organisms possess all sorts of characteristics that make them well adapted to various parts of the Earth. Now, some of the characteristics of arthropods, again, the jointed feet, the chitinous exoskeleton, their multiple legs give them greater stability. Their bodies tend to be lower to the ground, so they're sort of stable, quick, oftentimes quick organisms. Now, arthropods are also interesting because, again, they'll go through these moltings in which they can shed their chitinous exoskeleton in some species and undergo pretty significant changes. Okay, examples. We looked at the crustaceans. Again, just think of like a lobster or a crab. Insects. This is certainly the most diverse group of animals on the world, or in the world. Insects, again, adapted for all sorts. This is an incredibly adaptive body structure, this chitinous exoskeleton and the jointed legs. It's an incredibly adaptive body structure, and it's allowed insects to sort of fill all sorts of niches around the world. The arachnids are arthropods as well. Again, the jointed feet or the jointed legs. Okay. Next, we'll look at echinoderms. Echino means spine, derm is skin. So these are spiny-skinned animals. Just think of sea stars, or what you think of as a starfish. Okay. Their bodies have a pentaradial design, so they have 5 rays basically, and that's really, I mean, I can't imagine you're going to be asked a whole lot more than that. Echinoderms are marine organisms, so you find them in the oceans, and again, they have this 5-rayed design. They have a really cool water vascular system, but you're not going to be asked anything about that. You see these organisms here that superficially don't look like they have the 5-ray design, but internally they have that basic body structure, even sea cucumbers. Now, probably the most amazing feature of echinoderms is their regenerative capacities. They're brainless predators that can live indefinitely. Now, what they can do is completely regenerate themselves. If a single ray, as long as it has some of the central portion here, if a single ray is broken off, that individual ray or arm can grow into a complete organism. That's pretty astounding to think of an organism being able to do. But you know, we're familiar with the idea of you know, a lizard being able to lose a tail and regrow a tail. But with echinoderms, you can have it be in essence the tail growing into a brand new lizard. So echinoderms are really spectacular in their ability to survive. Now, those are the invertebrates that you'll need to know. In our next lecture, we'll look at organisms more similar to us, the chordates.